For over 2,000 years, Jesus' command to love your enemies has been taught as the ultimate moral test, a divine standard so impossibly high that most of us accept failure before we even begin. We hear those words and immediately feel the weight of inadequacy. How can I possibly love someone who betrayed me? How can I feel compassion for the person who destroyed my family, ruined my career, or caused me unspeakable pain? And so we try, through gritted teeth and forced prayers, to manufacture feelings that simply won't come. We tell ourselves we're supposed to forgive, that it's what good people do, that God expects it of us. But deep down, the resentment remains, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, eating away at our peace like acid, slowly dissolving metal. What if the person you hate the most is actually your greatest teacher, and the rage you carry toward them is the very thing blocking you from the transformation you've been desperately seeking? Has this ever happened to you? You wake up in the middle of the night, and before you're even fully conscious, their face appears in your mind. The person who wronged you, the one who gets to live rent-free in your thoughts, occupying space in your mental landscape that should belong to joy, creativity, or rest. You've tried everything. You've prayed for the strength to let go. You've read books about forgiveness. You've attended workshops, sought counsel, repeated affirmations. Yet that heavy stone of resentment sits in your chest, unmoved by all your efforts. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here's what almost no one tells you about Jesus' teaching on loving enemies. It was never meant to be a moral command at all. Stay with me until the end of this exploration, because what you're about to discover might completely revolutionize not just how you see that person who hurt you, but how you understand your own essential nature. What if Jesus wasn't asking you to force yourself to feel differently? What if he was pointing toward a recognition so profound that once you truly see it, loving your enemies becomes the most natural response in the world, not through moral effort, but through a fundamental shift in how you perceive reality itself? The teaching isn't about suppressing your natural reactions or pretending you feel something you don't. It's about discovering something about consciousness, about identity, about what you and your enemy actually are beneath the surface drama of human conflict. And this discovery, when it moves from intellectual understanding to lived experience, doesn't just transform your relationship with the people who've hurt you. It transforms everything about how you move through the world, how you experience yourself, and what becomes possible when you're no longer carrying that crushing weight of unresolved resentment. What truly changes inside you when you finally grasp why Jesus said these words isn't what you think. The conventional approach to this teaching has been trapping sincere seekers for centuries, and you've probably experienced this trap yourself without even realizing it. Religious tradition tells you that forgiveness is a moral obligation, something you must do because it's right, because God demands it, because your salvation might depend on it. So you stand there, facing the memory of betrayal or the presence of someone who's caused you genuine harm, and you try with everything in you to manufacture feelings of love and compassion. You repeat the words, you go through the motions, you pray for the strength to feel what you think you're supposed to feel. But here's the hidden truth behind why. This never quite works. Every single time you try to force yourself to love an enemy through sheer willpower, you're actually reinforcing the very separation you're trying to overcome. Think about what's happening in that moment. You're confirming that this person is fundamentally other than you, fundamentally opposed to your well-being, fundamentally your enemy. The harder you push yourself to generate love through moral effort, the more you cement the belief that love is absent from the situation and must be artificially created through discipline and religious duty. This is exhausting, and it's why so many people carry guilt about their inability to truly forgive. You think you're failing at a divine command, when in reality, you're simply trying to approach transformation from a level that can never produce genuine change. The mindset you're operating from treats forgiveness as an action you perform, rather than a recognition that emerges when you see clearly. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what Jesus was actually revealing through these words. He wasn't handing you a moral assignment to complete through effort. He was pointing towards something far more revolutionary, a recognition that dissolves the entire concept of enemy at its root. When Jesus said to love your enemies, he was inviting you to see reality the way he saw it, to recognize that the consciousness looking through your eyes and the consciousness looking through your enemies' eyes are not two separate, opposing forces locked in eternal conflict. There is one divine consciousness manifesting through infinite forms, and what you call your enemy is simply this same consciousness temporarily expressing through a wounded, confused, fearful personality. The person who hurt you hasn't become something fundamentally different from what you are. They've simply forgotten their true nature and are acting from that forgetting, from pain, from fear, from patterns inherited through generations of unconsciousness. This recognition changes everything, because love for enemies stops being something you have to manufacture and becomes something that naturally emerges when you see the shared essence beneath conflicting surface expressions. The transformation happens not through forcing yourself to feel differently, but through seeing truly what both you and your enemy actually are beneath the temporary drama of human conflict. If something in this resonates with your own journey, write in the comments. I've been trying to force it. This is the precise point where everything transforms from an impossible moral demand into a natural recognition that changes your entire experience of reality. The Christ consciousness that Jesus embodied, that awareness of unity with the divine, that unshakable peace regardless of external circumstances, was never his exclusive possession. It's the fundamental reality of what every being is beneath personality, beneath history, beneath behavior, beneath all temporary human experience. Your enemy, the person who betrayed you or caused you unspeakable pain, hasn't done anything that changes their essential nature as an expression of divine consciousness. Their harmful behavior flows entirely from forgetting this truth, from identifying completely with wounded ego and reactive patterns inherited through generations of pain. But beneath all of that, beneath the anger and the hurt and the defensive walls, the same infinite awareness that looks through your eyes also looks through theirs. This isn't poetic language designed to make you feel better. This is the literal truth about the nature of consciousness itself. And when you see it clearly, everything about how you relate to conflict transforms instantly. Joel Goldsmith, the spiritual teacher whose insights have transformed countless lives, discovered this truth in the most unexpected way. He didn't find it through years of studying scripture or following elaborate moral teachings. The breakthrough came in moments of deep stillness, when the constant mental noise finally quieted and something deeper could be seen. In that silence, he recognized with absolute clarity that the people he'd been struggling to forgive, the situations that had triggered his deepest resentment and judgment, were all expressions of the one consciousness that he himself was. This recognition didn't require him to approve of harmful behavior or pretend that real wrongs hadn't occurred. The impact of what he saw was far more profound than that. It simply revealed that beneath every surface conflict, beneath every human drama, there was no actual separation at the level of essential identity. The person who had wronged him wasn't fundamentally other, wasn't a separate entity opposed to his well-being. They were consciousness itself, temporarily lost in identification with fear and limitation, acting from wounds they didn't understand, perpetuating patterns they'd inherited without awareness. If what we've explored today resonated with you, I'd be honored to have you subscribe. Hit that button so you don't miss future content that continues building on this recognition. This recognition dissolves resentment not through moral effort, but through seeing what's actually true. When you recognize that your enemy is consciousness itself, temporarily confused about its own nature, how can you continue to hate? The hatred doesn't get suppressed or transcended through discipline. It simply evaporates in the light of this understanding, the way darkness disappears the moment you turn on a light. The transformation happens at a level far deeper than emotion or thought, at the level of fundamental perception about what reality actually is. And once this shift occurs, once you've genuinely seen this truth even for a moment, you can never quite return to the old way of perceiving conflict. Something essential has changed in how you understand both yourself and those you once called enemies. If you've had glimpses of this deeper truth, write in the comments, "I see beyond the surface." When this recognition shifts from being just an interesting intellectual concept to becoming your actual lived experience, something genuinely miraculous begins unfolding in your daily life. Resentments that you've been carrying for years, maybe even decades, suddenly lose their grip on you. And this doesn't happen because you've finally mustered enough willpower to let them go, or because you've performed some perfect forgiveness ritual. It happens because you've seen through the illusion that created those resentments in the first place. The person you've been calling your enemy is revealed as a confused expression of the same consciousness you are, and once you see this clearly, the entire foundation of your anger collapses. How can you remain furious at someone when you recognize them as a temporarily lost version of yourself, acting from wounds they don't understand, perpetuating patterns they never chose? The anger doesn't get pushed down or transcended through heroic moral effort. It simply dissolves in the light of this recognition, the way darkness instantly disappears the moment you flip on a light switch. There's no struggle involved because you're not fighting against your natural reactions anymore. You're seeing reality differently, and that shift in perception naturally transforms how you feel. This explains why every previous attempt at forgiveness probably felt so exhausting and ultimately unsuccessful. You've tried before, haven't you? You've sat there determined to forgive, repeating the words, going through the motions, praying for the strength to let go. And maybe you achieved some temporary relief, some surface-level peace that lasted a few days or weeks before the resentment crept back in. That's because forgiveness, approached as a moral duty you must perform, keeps you trapped in the very separation you're trying to heal. You're attempting to bridge a gap between yourself and an enemy who remains fundamentally other in your perception, fundamentally separate from who you are. It's like trying to connect two sides of a canyon by stretching yourself across the chasm through sheer determination. The effort is genuine, but the underlying paradigm makes success impossible. When you recognize the shared consciousness beneath conflicting personalities, forgiveness stops being something you do and becomes something that naturally emerges when you see truly. You're not pardoning someone separate from yourself anymore. You're recognizing that at the deepest level, at the level of essential being, there was never actually anyone separate to forgive in the first place. The wound was real, the behavior was real, the consequences were real, but the fundamental separation between you and your enemy was always an illusion created by identification with temporary personality rather than eternal consciousness. This distinction might seem subtle, but its impact on your inner experience is revolutionary. The burden you've been carrying doesn't require years of therapy or spiritual practice to dissolve. It requires seeing what's actually true about the nature of consciousness, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. If this understanding is beginning to shift something in you, write in the comments, "I'm ready to see differently." The practical impact of this recognition extends directly into your most challenging relationships, the ones that have been sources of pain and frustration for years. That family member who's been pushing every button you have for decades suddenly appears differently to you. You still see their behavior patterns clearly. You're not blind to the dysfunction or the cycles they keep repeating, but you also begin seeing something you couldn't see before. You see the wounded child beneath the defensive reactions, the fear driving the aggression, the divine consciousness beneath the confused personality, desperately trying to protect itself the only way it knows how. This shift in perception doesn't mean you suddenly accept abuse or maintain unhealthy boundaries. That's a crucial distinction many people miss when they first encounter these teachings. Recognizing someone's essential nature doesn't require you to tolerate harmful behavior or sacrifice your well-being. What it means is that you respond from clarity and compassion rather than from reactive anger and hurt. You can address harmful behavior, set firm boundaries, even remove yourself from toxic situations, all while not carrying the poison of resentment in your system. You're seeing the behavior as separate from essential identity, and that separation creates space for wise action rather than reactive patterns. Joel Goldsmith gave this quality a name that confuses people when they first hear it: divine indifference. The term sounds cold, doesn't it? It sounds like you're becoming detached, uncaring, emotionally numb to the suffering around you. But that's the exact opposite of what this actually describes. Divine indifference isn't about not caring. It's about discovering a profound inner stability that comes from recognizing your peace cannot be destroyed by anyone's behavior, because it's rooted in consciousness itself, not in circumstances. You care deeply about people and situations, perhaps more deeply than you ever have before, but you're not destabilized by them anymore. You can witness harm without being consumed by hatred. You can address wrongs without being overtaken by vengeance. You remain anchored in the recognition of what everyone truly is beneath their temporary expressions. And that anchoring gives you access to wisdom and compassion that reactive emotion could never produce. Think about what this means for how you move through your daily life. The colleague who undermines you at work still behaves the same way, but their actions no longer trigger that familiar spiral of anger and rumination that used to consume your evenings and weekends. The family gathering where that one relative always makes cutting remarks becomes something you can navigate with grace, because you're no longer taking their words as attacks on your essential being. You see them clearly, you respond appropriately, but you're not carrying their confusion as your burden. This is what living from recognition looks like in practical terms. It's not about becoming perfect or never feeling hurt. It's about discovering a foundation that remains stable regardless of the storm. And from that stability, entirely new responses become available to you. If you're beginning to experience this inner stability, write in the comments, "My peace is not dependent." The question that naturally arises is, how do you actually live from this recognition in the middle of ordinary life? When someone cuts you off in traffic and rage flashes through your body, when a colleague betrays your trust and every cell screams for revenge, how do you access this consciousness in those heated moments? Joel Goldsmith offered something beautifully practical that anyone can use immediately. He called it maintaining a listening attitude throughout your day. It's not complicated, and it doesn't require you to retreat to a meditation cushion for hours. When you encounter someone who triggers anger or judgment, you simply pause for just a breath and silently acknowledge this truth. The Christ that I am recognizes the Christ that you are beneath this behavior. You're not trying to manufacture warm feelings toward them or approve of their actions. You're not pretending that what they did is acceptable. You're simply recognizing the truth about their essential nature beneath the surface confusion. This subtle practice, repeated consistently in those triggering moments, gradually shifts your center of gravity from reactive personality to stable consciousness. It's like training a muscle. Each time you pause and make this recognition, you're strengthening your ability to see beyond the surface drama to what's actually true. If this resonated with you, leaving a like helps this message reach others who might be ready for this recognition. Let me share a story that illustrates just how powerful this shift can be when it moves from concept to lived experience. Sarah had been carrying rage toward her father for 30 years. The abuse she'd suffered as a child had shaped every relationship in her adult life, creating patterns of distrust and defensive walls that kept genuine intimacy at a safe distance. She'd done years of therapy, and it had helped her understand the patterns, helped her name what had happened to her, helped her see how the trauma had influenced her decisions. But the anger remained, burning in her chest like a fire that never quite went out. When Sarah first encountered these teachings about recognizing consciousness beneath personality, her initial reaction was dismissal and even anger. How dare anyone suggest she should see her abuser differently? But something beneath her resistance recognized a truth in these words that went beyond moral platitudes. She began, tentatively at first, to practice seeing her father not as the monster who had harmed her, but as a deeply wounded person whose own unhealed pain had expressed itself as abuse. This recognition didn't excuse his behavior or erase the impact of what he'd done. The wounds were real, the consequences were real, and nothing about this practice minimized that truth. But what it did do was release her from the prison of resentment she'd been living in for decades. The peace that emerged wasn't something she achieved through moral effort or positive thinking. It was what naturally arose when she saw truly, when she recognized that the person who had hurt her was consciousness itself, lost in patterns of pain inherited through generations. If you've experienced or witnessed this kind of transformation, write in the comments, "Recognition sets me free." There's a crucial distinction here that many people miss when they first encounter this teaching, and it's important to address it directly, because without this clarity, the entire message can be misunderstood in dangerous ways. Recognizing the divine consciousness in everyone does not mean you accept abuse, maintain toxic relationships, or fail to address harmful behavior. This is not a teaching about becoming a doormat or allowing yourself to be victimized in the name of spiritual enlightenment. Jesus himself overturned tables in the temple when he witnessed exploitation. He spoke truth to power. He confronted injustice directly. Loving your enemies means seeing their essential nature clearly while responding wisely to their behavior. These two things are not in conflict. You can maintain firm boundaries with someone while recognizing their spiritual wholeness. You can remove yourself from a destructive relationship while still seeing the confused consciousness beneath the harmful actions. You can work actively to stop injustice, to protect the vulnerable, to hold people accountable for their behavior, all while seeing the humanity in those perpetrating harm. The recognition doesn't lead to passive acceptance or spiritual bypassing, where you pretend everything is fine when it clearly isn't. It leads to wise, compassionate action that addresses harm without generating more suffering through hatred and vengeance. You respond from clarity rather than from reactive emotion, and that clarity often produces far more effective action than rage ever could. When you begin consistently living from this recognition, something remarkable starts happening in the world around you that extends far beyond your personal transformation. People feel something different in your presence, even when they can't articulate exactly what has changed. Your refusal to participate in Cycles of judgment and retaliation create space for others to step out of those patterns too. It's as if you're holding open a doorway that others didn't even know existed. You become a presence that silently reminds people of their own essential nature, not through preaching or trying to convince them of anything, but simply through the quality of awareness you're maintaining. This isn't about trying to change people or fix them, which would just be another form of judgment suggesting they're broken and need your help. It's about maintaining awareness of what they truly are beneath their confusion, and that awareness itself creates an atmosphere where their highest qualities can naturally emerge. You're no longer feeding the drama of separation with your reactions. You're not adding fuel to the fire of conflict. You're anchoring something deeper in every interaction, a stability and peace that others can feel, even if they don't understand its source. The impact ripples outward in ways you'll never fully see or measure, touching lives in the hidden corners where genuine transformation happens. If you've noticed this shift in how people respond to your presence, write in the comments, "Others feel the difference." The ultimate transformation that occurs when you truly grasp this teaching isn't what most people expect. It's not that you become better at loving enemies or develop some superhuman capacity for forgiveness. The real shift is far more profound than that. You stop having enemies altogether. Not because everyone around you suddenly starts treating you well, or because conflict magically disappears from your life, but because you've seen through the fundamental illusion that anyone could be opposed to you at the level of essential being. Conflicts still arise in your experience. Disagreements happen, harmful behavior occurs, people still act from confusion and pain, but you're no longer relating to them as enemies, as fundamentally other, as threats to your existence. You're seeing confused expressions of consciousness, wounded personalities acting from pain and fear they don't fully understand, temporary forgetting of essential nature that shows up as harmful behavior. This shift doesn't make you naive or vulnerable to manipulation. It actually makes you more clear, more compassionate, and genuinely free from the suffering that comes from carrying hatred and judgment like heavy stones in your backpack. You can see harmful patterns more clearly because you're not blinded by reactive emotion. You can respond more effectively because you're acting from wisdom rather than from the need to defend a threatened ego. What Jesus was offering in this teaching wasn't a moral burden to carry or an impossible standard designed to make you feel inadequate. It was an invitation to recognize what you actually are beneath personality, beneath emotion, beneath all temporary human experience. When you know yourself as consciousness itself, rather than identifying primarily as a vulnerable personality constantly threatened by others, love for everyone becomes the natural expression of that recognition. Not sentimental emotion or forced affection that you manufacture through effort, but recognition of shared essence beneath all surface differences. This recognition is available to you right now in this moment. It's not something you need to develop through years of spiritual practice or meditation retreats. It's not a state you achieve after accumulating enough moral merit or religious devotion. It's what's already true about you, simply waiting for your awareness to discover it. The Christ consciousness that Jesus embodied, that capacity to love enemies, isn't his exclusive possession locked away in ancient history. It's your fundamental nature right now, and every single person who has ever harmed you or opposed you is that same consciousness temporarily lost in confusion. When you see this clearly, when this recognition becomes your lived reality rather than just an interesting idea, the entire landscape of human relationship transforms before your eyes. What was a battlefield becomes a classroom. What was endless conflict becomes endless opportunities for recognition. If you're beginning to sense this freedom emerging in your own experience, write in the comments, "I have no enemies." If you've made it this far in our conversation, I want to acknowledge something significant. You're not here by accident. There's a reason this message found you at this particular moment in your journey. The recognition we've been exploring together isn't just interesting spiritual philosophy to add to your collection of ideas. It's pointing toward the deepest truth about what you are. And something within you already knows this. That's why you're still here, still listening, still allowing these words to resonate with whatever is awakening in your awareness. I create content like this every week, diving into these transformative principles that have the power to completely reconfigure how you experience life and relationships. If what we've explored today resonated with you, if something shifted in your understanding, I'd be honored to have you join this community of people who are waking up to their true nature. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future explorations that continue building on what we've discovered together today. And here's how I'll know you made it all the way through. Write in the comments, "This message found me." When I see that, I'll know you received what was meant for you in this moment. Your comment also helps this video reach others who might be ready for this recognition, creating ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. If you found value in this perspective, leaving a like helps tremendously. It's a simple way of saying this matters, and it ensures that others who need to hear this will find their way here exactly when they're ready. There's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper into practical application. It explores how consciousness transforms not just conflict, but every dimension of your daily experience. Click and continue with me over there. I think you'll find it's the perfect next step on this journey we're taking together. The consciousness that you are has always been whole. I'm simply grateful to walk alongside you as you remember what you've always known.